Hello everyone, my name is Gretchen and this is Cover Art, a series where I talk about video games I've been playing while also doing my makeup at the same time. Normally my looks are kind of based on the video games, but depends on what I'm feeling. I will leave all of the makeup that I used in the description below if you're into that sort of thing, otherwise I'll go ahead and get started with today's game. Today I want to hop back into those JRPG games I've been talking about, the Legend of Heroes series. I know it's been a minute since I uploaded last. I've just been tired. Not much more explanation for it. So the third arc in the Legend of Heroes games is called Trails of Cold Steel. Now there are actually 4 different games in the Trails of Cold Steel series. It starts with 1 and 2 kind of back to back, and then 3 and 4 back to back. The first 2 games were released in 2013 and 2014 for the PS3, and then 3 and 4 were actually released for the PS4. And that was in 2019 and 2020. Games are still made by Falcom and then imported over to the US. And the games are still set in the same universe as well. Same continent that we've been on, Zemuria. Same time period as the Trails in the Sky and Trails of Azure and Zero. So just as a quick recap, for Zemuria there are a bunch of countries, some bigger, some smaller, spread across the continent. In the first video I talked about how we were in the country of Liberal, or Liberal, still not sure which one it is. The second arc, or second set of games that we went into took us to Crossbell, which was a city-state, kind of north of Liberal, but in between 2 major powers, being Erebonia and Calvard. Now this third arc, or series if you want to call it, is actually going to take place in Erebonia. Erebonia is an empirical country, it's rather large, and it's right next to Crossbell, and it is north of Liberal. Erebonia is a country that has come up multiple times in the other games, just because they're empirical. They have this habit of trying to absorb smaller countries or city-states. There's also a system of order or ranking in Erebonia, so there are nobles and commoners, which I'm sure is pretty self-explanatory. So for these 4 games, we are in Erebonia, and we're following actually the same protagonist the entire time. Our protagonist in these games is named Rean Schwarzer. He is the adopted son of a baron in Erebonia, so he is technically from a noble family, but he's adopted, so he has his own issues there. Also, barons aren't particularly high in the ranking order of nobles, so it's not like he lived a completely lavish lifestyle. Because, you know, even within the noble faction, there is ranking there as to how important your family is and to what region you belong to and such and such. So we start the first game with Rean Schwarzer. He is starting his first year at a military academy called Thors Military Academy, very close to the capital of Erebonia, Heimdallr. And although he chose a military academy to attend, he's actually not sure what he wants to do. It's not a guarantee that going to a military academy is going to mean you'll end up in the military. So in the grand scheme of things in this universe here, there's not really high school. Kids don't technically go to high school. They can. There are some specialty schools. So in this case, we're thinking of Thors Military Academy. It's a 2-year institution of just underclassmen and upperclassmen. And it follows a high school like formula. Like it's pretty much high school, just only 2 years, and a military academy. So there's not only your normal classes that you would find typically, but there's also a lot of combat-based classes. So Rean starts attending this school, and typically they actually separate the nobles from the commoners. You can tell via what uniform a student is wearing whether they're a commoner or a noble. Rean, however, is sent a different uniform altogether, and upon arrival finds out that he is in a new class called Class 7. The classes are numbered 1 through 5, and then there's no 6 for some reason, and he's in Class 7. It's a brand new class, and it mixes both nobles and commoners, which is definitely different for this school. It's always been that, you know, they kept them separate for whatever reason. Rean finds himself in a kind of hodgepodge class of 9 students total, and their homeroom teacher orients them by dropping them into a dungeon to kind of assess their teamwork ability and combat ability right off the get-go. Literally opens a trapdoor underneath them. While Class 7 follows a similar curriculum to the rest of the school, they actually get to take little field trips. They travel around Erebonia and assist people with whatever requests they might have, whatever help is needed in the area, and they get this real-world example of how life is for both the noble faction and the commoner faction in their country. They realize right away that the work they're doing is very similar to that of a bracer, which, if you remember in previous videos, bracers are a non-country affiliated organization that focuses on assisting citizens. Not so much a government entity. They are not owned by any single government. They just go around and help wherever is needed. And in Erebonia, there actually are not many bracers anymore. There used to be, and they all kind of got, I don't want to say kicked out, but something like that. A certain member of the government named Osborne, Gileath Osborne, kind of started this process of removing bracers from around Erebonia. Why that is, you'll find out later, but needless to say, there's some tension there. So these students are traveling around, they're going on field trips, they're seeing what kind of problems their country has or has created for the residents firsthand. Every field trip gets them into a sticky situation, whether that's due to the government and the relationship between nobles and commoners, or if it's due to, I don't know, a secret society like Ouroboros that's kind of just been playing around in the background. So as they travel around, Class 7 gets to really see tensions rise throughout the country, which ultimately leads to a civil war breaking out. So a lot of the first game focuses on the introduction of the characters because you do have 9 children to take care of. It's a huge party. That's a lot of children to take care of. I don't even have children in real life, are you kidding me? So 1 builds up a lot of backstory and character development, whereas 2 deals a lot with the Civil War and how the Class 7 students handle this sudden outbreak in their country. Because they are far more involved than any 16-year-old should be. But hey, it's a JRPG, so that is what it is. So Trails of Cold Steel 2 ends with the resolution of the Civil War, and 3 actually takes a bit of a time jump to a year later. Still the same character, still Reen, who's now a graduate of Thors. He has actually come to what is now a branch campus of Thors in a different city as an instructor. All grown up. And he's teaching, he is the teacher now. You are the teacher now. And of course, now Reen is teaching the new Class 7. Isn't that exciting? I will say through the course of the first and second games, Reen does gain a bit of fame for reasons I won't go into. But needless to say, he's a well-known person in all of Erebonia now. It's actually quite funny. He starts the game with a pair of glasses as if he's like fucking Superman trying to hide his identity, and everyone's kind of like, what are you doing with your glasses? It's not doing anything for you. We still know you're Reen Schwarzer. So luckily in the third game, your class size is significantly smaller with just 3 students. Well, eventually 5, but that's still pretty manageable compared to, I don't know, 9? So now the main focus of this game of 3 and 4 altogether are Reen Schwarzer and the new Class 7, primarily. We do see the graduates from his previous class, the old Class 7, so to speak, as they interact with the new Class 7. Again, now that they're at a branch school, they're still following a similar formula, but the entire branch campus is a mix of nobles and commoners. So there are other classes there as well, focusing on different fighting techniques and classes. Now, while there is no longer a civil war, tensions are still pretty high, but this time with the neighboring country of Calvard. Now, Calvard has always kind of been a rival to Erebonia. As opposed to being an empire, they're actually a republic, and they've always been at odds with each other. So the new Class 7 is still traveling around and acting very much like a bracer would, but instead of tensions within the country, while there are still many, It's more of a focus on the tensions of what could war mean if we were to suddenly have to fight against another large power like Calvard. Erebonia don't stop. They non-stop with this fighting. So towards the end of 3, we do get another war that breaks out because the Erebonian government is apparently led by warmongers. Not really much else to say about that. And 3 ends rather dramatically, and 4 picks up right after. Honestly, I was glad to be able to play through the games back to back because I would have probably blown a fuse having to wait between with the way they ended 3 into 4. I should also mention at this point that the war that breaks out with Calvard is largely a sinister plot of, again, Ouroboros. Among other things, actually. There's actually a lot of conflict in these games between multiple different factions, whether that be the Erebonian government, Ouroboros, bracers and what they're trying to do, city-states that are trying to gain independence from Erebonia or felt that they've been wronged by Erebonia. If you can imagine that. And I mean, yeah, they deserve it. They did a lot of people dirty to build the empire to what it is. Even when you start the first game, that's the case. Not bad for winging my eyeliner. Ha. Get it? I'm done. Alright, so gameplay-wise, I know that was a lot. That was a lot to cover between 4 games without spoiling much of anything, but we did it. Thanks for bearing with me. Gameplay-wise, it's still a JRPG. It's still a turn-based game. There were, however, massive overhauls to the magic or orbal arts component of the game, as they call it. They super simplified it, like really toned it down, which if you liked the complexity of it, can be a bummer. I was fine either way, to be totally honest. They also added a little bit more customization to those magic trees or orbal arts by including a new mechanic known as Master Quartz into the game. And it basically just was like the way you'd build around your orbal arts was based on your Master Quartz, if you wanted. Game interface does change quite a bit between 2 and 3, and I attribute that to the fact that they went from a PS3 engine to a PS4 engine, so they had to adapt to the new gen console. And the games themselves are honestly paced pretty slowly. I mean, you do have 4 games total, a lot of ground to cover as far as backstory, history, character development of at first 9 characters and then just 5 characters and then back to like everybody, like everyone's back. They didn't leave anyone out for 3 and 4. Well, for 4 I should say. And then on top of that you do get little cameos from people from the other games. So we see people from Liberal and we see people that we love from Crossbell. It gets pretty buck wild, honestly. As far as the politics of it go, it's pretty intense. There's a lot. I got it all over my hands. It's fine. It's just that there. It's fine. I'm good at this. I'm so good at makeup. Anywho, so like I kind of already mentioned a couple of times, it's a lot to deal with. So many characters that you have to get equipment for, that you have to upgrade. I would say even in the first game they do a pretty good job, or the first 2 games I should say, they do a pretty good job of kind of pacing it so that you're not buying all the students' armor and new weapons constantly. They kind of rotate characters in and out. So that is good, because money management is definitely needed in these games. When you got 9+ kids to feed, you better believe you gotta watch your money. But 3 and 4 resolve that issue by dramatically reducing the class size, so I would say they probably learned that they kind of, I don't want to say overdid it, but they definitely made it a challenge with that many characters. Lots of story to tell as far as where they come from and why they're at Thors. Parts of 1 and 3 respectively are pretty slow at the beginning and then kind of have dramatic sequences into 2 and 4. 2 and 4 having more of the actual like action, so to speak, but with all that tension exploding from government conflict. You do get different modes of transportation, so sometimes you end up with orbital bikes, horses, or you're just hoofing it, just making kids pretty much run across the country. Rean can also build up affinity with different members of Class 7, both in the school period and the teaching period. And it just means they fight well together, but it's not a high school sim without a little bit of dating, so you do have like romantic partners that Rean can choose from, the different members of Class 7. There's one character that the game very obviously ships with Rean, and I don't know particularly why that happened. If they're gonna let you pick different characters for your main character to date, why would you kind of push for one in particular? I don't really know. In that regard, I wish they would have let me kind of like mix and match the different students if they were gonna let me have a dating sim like that and not just Rean, but that didn't happen, so whatever. So yeah, high school life sim basically. I am pretty easily absorbed into games of this nature though. I mean, if you can imagine, I cranked through the first series, which was the Sky games, and then, you know, went out of my way to figure out how to play the Crosswell games, which are now being localized officially. So that's exciting. And I just really like story-driven games. So high school life with 16-year-olds trying to save their country, I mean, sounds pretty story heavy to me, doesn't it? These games also help clarify some of the hearsay and rumors that you get from the other games regarding Erebonia and what it's like, because there's so many people in such a huge country. A lot of opinion is mixed even within the country itself, which, you know, who could imagine? Who could imagine something like that? But anyways, now all the talk you've heard about Erebonia and the other games, you actually get to see firsthand. The secret society that connects all of these games together isn't a huge player in 1 and 2. They are more so in 2, but it really picks up speed for them in 3 and 4. 4 does a good job of wrapping up things nicely, I would say, for Erebonia, which, I mean, they had 4 games to do it, so I should hope so. And despite the slower pace at certain points in the game, I would still recommend it, because they are just fun. I mean, it's fun to run around with this new group of kids that, you know, the developers and people who write at Falcom are really good at getting you attached, I would say, to their characters. So, you know, even though we've got a whole new cast, they still have a lot going for them. These games also still hold true to the idea that, you know, they kind of just take every single trope in anime that they can and just get it all in there. Lots of different genres popping out at you. Just a whole lot going on. So many things I didn't even talk about in this video because I didn't want to spoil too much of it, but, you know, did you want a comedy? Did you want something dramatic? Did you want adventure? Did you want high fantasy? Did you want a mecha? You know, just really creates to the all-in-one sort of method that they've been doing. Well, thank you once again for joining me today. Let me know what you thought of the video and let me know what you thought of my makeup look. Don't do anything too flashy, but I kind of like it that way. Maybe one day I'll do something extreme with my makeup, but we'll see. But yeah, thank you again for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or night or whatever comes next for you, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Yeah.
The 3 of you make up Class 7. Special Operations. Your instructor will be him.
I'm Rean Schwarzer. Time is short. Let's get started.